And recording. Time is 6 o'clock p.m. It is Thursday, July 25th, 2019. This is ITSC 2309 at Collin College. Push this thing back down out of my way. Okay. A couple of things I wanted to cover for the, let me make sure that I am recording. Okay, it's time for us to talk about test 2, which will be for usually most people won't take the final if they're happy with the grade, if they need to raise their grade. But if you've got everything turned in and you have decent grades on test 1 and 2, that probably don't need to fool with the final. Anyway, that's the final is intended as a booster, kind of a redo on the 2 tests. So I'm going to make test 2, I think I'll make it become available this weekend and leave it available for what I'm guessing. Okay, so if I made it available today and took it down on, how about Monday? Well, since it's kind of coming quickly, I'd like to leave it up for a while. So I think what I'll do is give you a day to do the practice test. Practice test is kind of a freebie. It's 5 points, but I'll make the practice test due pretty fast, and then the I'll make test 2 available, and so the practice test is available now. And I'll tell you when that's going to time out, and then so test 2 is coming up pretty quickly. I think this weekend it will be available. So, but it's you'll have 3 or 4 days to get it done. I don't want to take you out of time on it. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, I didn't have time to finish it. I didn't have time to finish it." Take the time you need to finish the test, but it's not one of those things of you just have an unlimited amount of time. Let me put it that way. I say I figure about 3 hours is reasonable. If it takes you a little longer than that, use it. You'll do a lot better if you go ahead and use your time. I'm not going to because it's 10 minutes over time. I'm not going to worry about it. Anyway, so that's where I'm at on the time on those tests. Don't come, oh, I couldn't get this done. I didn't get the last 2 questions done because I ran out of time. You'll do better if you'll just take the extra time and do them. What I'm saying is don't just don't go 3 or 4 days on the test, please. In other words, sit down and do it. All right. So that's going to become available. We need to get that started, I guess, this week. So I'll start it probably. I'll probably make the test available Saturday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, at least. So I won't cut it off for Tuesday, and we'll talk about it when we're. So on Tuesday, let me know what's going on, and I'll be negotiable on it. And today, what are we talking about today? Today we are in functions, chapter 11. Now let's see, you can see practice test 2 at this time. I will make the solutions available, and then test 2 comes up. We've got 3 more modules due. I've got selected topics in database design, creating and maintaining indexes, and using views. Now, these don't have to come in any set order. Sometime I will do the using views first, and I might go ahead and do that. If I do, I'll probably renumber them just so it's not confusing which ones I've got. Okay, here we go. I am not having much luck getting my convert running. I'm trying to get this guy. I don't use it a whole lot because for the most part, when I'm doing converting dates into something else, I'm using a web page. So the web page typically comes with a rich set of operators to work with these. Anytime I'm working with a date, I will always cast the date, because I never can remember exactly what the format is for the date. So if I just cast it as a date, it really doesn't matter. I can use any format I want. So I will never write a date. I mean, I just write it the way I like it. And you just write your date the way you like to and cast it as a date. And that's the simplest way. Now you don't have to remember what the format is. Now this convert is supposed to convert my date into something different, and I'm going to have to figure out why it's not working. When I say execute this, it's supposed to give me it's supposed to give me JUL in there, I think. So let's see, 2019. So if I just cast, if I cast, I get that. So execute 2019 7/25. If I convert, I get the same thing. Now this conversion number over here, that's supposed to give me a way of formatting it. And if I go look at the textbook, it gives me a bunch of different numbers. I'm going to have to go read the textbook and see what they're telling us to do on that. And I'll get back to you on conversion. Okay, string functions are, we had talked a little bit about observers. An observer function tells me, it gives me information about the string. So if I say I want to know the length of that string, I believe we've already done that. It tells me that there are 11 characters in that string. This is real commonly done. I say select if I just want to see it. I could have said print here. It's a little bit different. Let me go ahead and show it to you. This works, print. I'm not telling you to do this. We might do it in the next class. I don't encourage it anyway. But if you say print, that's different. Now watch how it's different. When I say print, notice how that's just different. It just comes up on the screen. So I can say print hello world. And it's kind of like see out or something. I don't typically teach it because select is actually a lot stronger, because if you say select, what you're doing is you're formatting hello world into a table. If you say len, what you get, len, you come back with a table. So this guy gives me a table that has the number 11 in it. If I print it, it just shows up on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and comment those guys out. I guess I'll leave them in there that I've talked about them. Select len, quote, quote, as my len. So that's going to give me 0. And select len. Notice I've got leading spaces on this one, and so the leading spaces are going to count here. I want to point out something though. When I say select len at X and I've got trailing spaces, I think it's going to only show me 1. So by default, it does not count trailing spaces. It chops off trailing spaces. Now, I wish it wouldn't. I wish it would either just chop them both off or chop none of them off or just leave them there. I have a function that will chop them off, but they're still there even though it's not counting them. So I'm going to show you how to find out about the trailing spaces on the right side. Sometimes they're important and sometimes they're not. For the most part, I really don't like them because they just get in my way and clutter things up. Let me go on with this. I'll come back to that length and fixing this problem of the trailing spaces. Char index, where is O in this guy, hello world? So the char index tells me where to find this. By the way, it's not necessarily one character. It can be a string of characters. and it will tell me where it starts. So if I were looking for EL, for example, so that's going to start at position 2. Well, if I can get my mouse on it. There, he starts at position 2, and that's the first place he found him. If I say O, I want to find O. Notice I have 2 O's. If I give it the last integer there, I'm saying start at position 6, looking for it. So when I look for this one, I find the O starting at position 6. It tells me it's at position 8, and you have to remember that the spaces in the middle of the character definitely count. If I don't find it, if it's not there, so Y is not in Hello World, I'm going to return 0. So in SQL, when we start counting characters, we start at 1, unlike some programming languages like C and Java, where you would start counting at 0. It's not true that you start counting at 0, you start counting at 1, but you're not counting the character, you're counting the number of moves you make. So you start at the beginning, that's 0, and you count the number of moves, number of times you moved. It's a little bit like asking, are you counting the cars on a railroad, on a freight train, or are you counting the couplings? I don't know. Are you counting the first of the car or the last of the car? And that gets into a big argument in computer science. I don't find it to be real exciting, but a lot of times they'll start counting at 0. You just have to know what it's going to do. And in SQL, the arrays, so this is an array of characters, and it's going to start counting at 1. Pattern index allows me to use a wildcard, question marks and stuff like that, just like you did with, I don't know, like, the same sort of things. This is, by the way, is called regular expression. So find anything, TIME. I think I can put a question mark in here. I believe this should, question mark, I believe that's going to match any single character, TIME, TYME, I think. Sometimes it'll throw me a curve here. No, didn't find it. I don't know. I just have to go look at that one in the book. I don't use it very much again. Okay, here's right trim and left trim, R trim, L trim. R trim trims off stuff to the right. Now, in theory, this is supposed to take these guys off at the right. If I just were to look at that, I'm going to get hello. They're trimmed off to the right. I guess what I could do, I could say, I could stick a character out there plus. Okay, so that'll concatenate that guy out there, and so let's see where he ends up. Notice that it trimmed him off, but if I just say, let's test it without trimming. So I'm not going to trim, I'm going to leave this spaces on there, and then I'm going to put that asterisk out there at the end so that I can see it. And so let's take a look at what I haven't seen. Notice that it puts the asterisk out at the end, so I'm saying append that asterisk to it. L trim, left trim, trims off spaces to the left. If you say L trim, open parentheses, so if I need to get them both and I want to kill all the spaces at either end of it, I would do L trim, R trim, and I guess I'll put a space in there so you can see it a little bit better formatted. This will trim off the spaces from either end of it. SQL will usually automatically trim leading and trailing spaces, but they're still there. If you need to see them, so if I say len of hello, the length of hello, actually it's going to trim trailing spaces more often than leading. Leading spaces will tend to be there. So how big is hello? It's 5 characters. If I have a couple of one character at the beginning and I say how long is that, it's going to tell me that's 6 characters. If I have one at the beginning and 1, 2, 3 at the end, and I say the length of that string with 3 characters at the end, it's still going to say it's 6 because it automatically chopped off the 3 characters at the end. And most of the time that's really what you want. You don't, they kind of tend to get in your way. And if you know it's going to do it, it's okay. Sometimes I need it though, and if you need to get it, you can get it by using data length, D-A-T-A-L-E-N-G-T-H. This is not in the textbook, so you need to make a note of this. It is a handy one to have. So if I say select the data length, then I'm going to get all the spaces on either side of it. Notice I get 8 now because I've got 5 and then I got 3 spaces on the end. So it's going to count them all. I didn't put one at the beginning of that. If I had put one at the beginning of that, I would get 9. So this is going to count, data length counts all the spaces, unprintable characters, and everything like that. That's a good one to remember, and it is in standard SQL, and I think it should be in the textbook because there's lots of times when, I don't know, lots of times, but for the most part, I don't really need trim. I certainly don't need right trim. I just let the system trim it. But there's sometimes when I do need those characters, those trailing characters, one way or the other. So if I want them, I have to use data length. Okay, left and right. Select left. Hello world, I want the left 5 characters. What will I get here? 5 characters. We've done this one before, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. That gives me hello. Select the right 5 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to get world. Execute world. Select left, right. So if I need something out of the middle, select the left, let's see, left 1 of the right 8. So what is the right 8? The right 8 would give me these guys, and then go in there and select the left 1. So this is how I could get it. Now, I haven't mentioned it, maybe I've mentioned it, but you can declare a variable. Now, it is possible, and I might discuss that briefly because there comes a time when we're going to need to create a variable, and real soon now, we're going to start doing some programming in SQL Server. Not in this class, in the next class though, right? Just the very first part of the next class, we're going to be writing programs if you're into that class. And we're going to need variables. So we're going to need to do if, then, else. We're going to need to do a while loop, all that jazz that you're used to. And yes, you can do it. Now in SQL proper, we don't create variables because, well, most of the time they're just kind of just get in our way and cause our program to run more slowly. But I could have created a string variable and put this one into it. So used a variable and then gone in there and pulled the left 1 character of that. But I do a lot better in SQL most of the time if you never declare a variable. You try to avoid it. By the way, these 2 lines are the same. The left 1 of the right 8 is the same thing as the right 1 of the left 8. So either way, I'm going to get the same letter back. It's going to give me back a W. Either of these will get the W. Substring. Substrings are kind of handy sometimes. Substring called me Ishmael 6 and 2. So the string that I'm taking the piece of, how many do I want? Starting where? Starting at position, no, starting at position 6, give me 2. I always have to go look that one up. So it's kind of weird. The order of the parameters in SQL is not always the same. So this is the position, and this is how many. So if I select substring, it's going to go in there and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Starting here, it's going to give me 2 characters. So when I execute this, I'm going to get back to the word ME. Gets a little weirder. Replace, pretty straightforward. In this string, v5fo-fum, I want you to replace E with a tilde. I guess that's important. It is if you want to do it. Concat. Concat, there's 2 ways to do concat. Most people, when they write SQL, will use this second version. They just put the plus between them. If you put plus between 2 strings, it will in effect concatenate them. Where it gets a little strange is when you are concatenating numbers and strings and dates, and you're trying to put it, together as something to pass off to a web page. And lots of times that you'll need to cast the number as a string, as a varchar. So either of these will do the same thing. It will put it all together, v5fo-fum. This one puts them together, and the one up here will do exactly the same thing. So concat, or using the plus between them, are most people, when they're writing SQL code, will use this second version. I do all the time. Upper and lower raises it to uppercase, lowercase. For example, this one is going to change it to all lowercase. Everything's lowercase. The next one makes it all uppercase. That's pretty straightforward. Are there questions? I'm going to go right on into numbers. A floor. What's a floor? The floor is below you. This rounds it down, or it rounds it to the right. So if I take the floor of 3.523, by the way, we have a round also that I don't think it discussed. Execute this guy. He rounds him down to a 3, even though normally he would round up. Let's see. If I say select round, round, comma, I have to have a, how many decimal places do you want? So I'm going to round this to 0 decimal places. I'm going to round it to an integer. If I say round him, he's going to round him to a 4.00. I could have cast him. If I want him to be an integer, I'll have to cast him if I want to get rid of those zeros. So I would say select cast. I usually put a space there. Round as int and integer are used interchangeably in this language. Where you find integer, you can usually write int. So this should give me the 4. So rounding it rounds it off to however many decimal points I specify here. Okay, floor. Floor goes down to the next integer, going to the right, getting so floor to the right. Yeah. No. If I round right, I'm sorry, I should be saying left here. It's rounding it to the left, isn't it? So let me change that. Rounds it left. In other words, it's rounding it down, so it's going down to the smaller number. So 3.523, the smaller number is 3. If I take the floor of a negative 3.5 something, it's going to round it down to a negative 4 because that's the next smaller number. So it's always going down. And now this one, I need to have right on it, don't I? Fast and loose with it. Ceiling is different from floor. How is ceiling different from floor? Well, ceiling's above your head, I guess. So if I say select the ceiling, it's going to go up to the next integer. So up to a 4, and then select the ceiling of negative 3.5 something is going to go up to the next higher integer, and the next larger integer is going to be a negative 3. So floor always goes to the, so floor goes which way on the number line? So this one, taking the floor from 3, floor is going to go left on the number line. Ceiling is going to always go right on the number line. Rounding it just rounds like you're used to rounding. It gets the next closest number to it. Some systems will give you something called fix. SQL Server does not give us a fix. I think I said it did in the module, but it does not give that to us. I looked that up, and so fix always chops towards 0. So if I fix 3.523, I would get a 3. If I fix negative 3.523, it would give me a negative 3. So it always chops off to 0. Okay. Another one that's commonly found in SQL programming is the term truncate. Truncate is not given to us in SQL Server, but truncate, we can cast it to an integer. So if I say cast it, what does that do? That chops off the decimal. So when I say, cast it, that just truncates it to a 3, and that's the same thing as a truncate. I don't need it. If I'm trying to get the decimal place only, I have to, this is the way I do it. I would select the absolute value of 3.523 minus, cast it as an int, and so now I'm going to subtract the 3, so I'll subtract 3 from 3.523. I have to take the absolute value because it might be negative. If it isn't negative, it'll work without the absolute value. And on this guy, I get just the decimal part. So I think you can figure out how you could do a fix. I don't know whether to do this next one or not. Question, please. Go ahead.
Ceiling and floor, do those set the output to an int, or are they like round where it's not an integer and you have to cast it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Round kind of caught me by surprise there. I'm used to round giving me an integer. It surprised me that I had to cast it. So I don't know whether you caught that in my voice or not. I was on, huh? I'm used to rounding it. If I round 3.523, I would have expected it to give me the integer value 4 and not the decimal value 4.000. Okay, but then again, you can round to 1 decimal place. So maybe it's right, but floor and ceiling always give you an integer.
But that, like you said, that round point does lend some confusion to the validity of the statement that we have, that when you set the decimal point, it's now an int, like money. There's a set decimal point, right. So it's no longer a floating point; it's an int. And so that does confuse me about those other manipulations of that that number, and what their type becomes after that.
Well, it usually doesn't. The result of it can change. Now, it doesn't change the type of the argument. So if I say truncate or cast 3.523 as integer, the 3.523 didn't change, but the result of that function, that cast function, came back as an integer. So the functions do not change their arguments. So if it was a when you fix the decimal place in anything in computer science, typically it treats it as an integer if it can, because if it can treat it as an integer, I just eliminate lots of problems. And anytime I can stay in an integer, I'm going to. Sometimes I just can't. For example, in a logarithm, okay, did we finish that question before I move on to the...
Yes, but actually, and forgive me if I should know this already, but so these manipulations, as you point out, don't actually change the data in the database. How do you change the data type of a whole column then in the database?
Okay, well, the data type is going to be fixed. You would have to have another field in there, and so you would set it to, you'd set the field to whatever you wanted. So, for example, if I had a I would have either another table, or I would add a column to at the table, and then I would have to put it over into that other column. So if I wanted to change the type, I cannot change a type. Once I've defined that type as type decimal, five with two decimal places, that's what it's going to be. I can't change that field. Okay. I can select it, and when it comes out of my select statement, it can be anything. So I get a table anytime I do a select statement and I cast it as a float, for example, in my return table, that is a float. And if I made a new table out of that, we're going to talk about doing that in the next chapter, I believe. Well, I can create a new table. I don't usually, but I can, and make it be a float.
Gotcha. So in the real world, if you needed to change a column, you'd actually have to go in and duplicate the column and then potentially go back and delete your old column if you wanted those values. Right. You know what I mean? If you wanted to make it permanent in your database.
I really don't like doing that. When we get to let's see, it's the last module actually, but I might do it next. When we get there, we'll see that we have a way around it so that I can create kind of an alias column that isn't really in the database, but it's just calculated, and it looks like it's in the database to us, but it isn't really there. So it'd be just a calculated column, an alias column. But as far as using it, I can use it for anything. And I wouldn't be able to insert into it, of course.
Thank you.
Logarithm. Have we done logarithms yet? Lots of times students' eyes roll back in their head when I talk about logarithms. If I take a log base 2 of 32, log base 2 of 32 is 5 because 2 to the 5th power is 32. Does that make sense? So are we talking the same language?
Yes.
Okay. The way that we do it in this, if I just say log log, what you're doing, you're taking a natural logarithm. So I take the log of the thing that I want to do. I want the log of 32, so I take log 32. Then I divide by the base. That will usually be 2 or 10, but it doesn't have to be 2 or 10. Lots of times I want the natural log base, the log base E, which is Euler's constant. And it's used in a lot of financial calculations. You'll see these logs coming in there. But I'll do logarithms a lot base 2 because being a computer scientist, I'm interested in how big of a number I can have with 32 bits or something like that. So I've got this many bits. How many different numbers can I have? And so I do a lot of work with logs, and I'll usually do log 2, log 10. So if I said log, if I were to talk about log of 1,000 divided by log 10, I'm saying 10 to what power is 1,000? Well, I think we know that 10 to the third power is 1,000. So when I execute this, I'm going to see a 3. Now, sometimes it will give me decimal points there and sometimes not, because a log is usually a floating point number. It's really tough to, most of the time they are. Okay, I don't want to beat this horse on the logarithms too much. If you don't do logarithms, well, lots of people don't. If you're into physics, you probably don't. You're probably more into degrees and pi and all that stuff. But doing a log is a lot like working with pi. Okay, so I'm going to, I mentioned that one, so at least I've talked about it. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about dates. First, but before you do these exercises, run, let's see, what was it? Create. Let's see, well, did I have an underscore there? I don't remember. I don't think I had an underscore in that one. .sql. Now, if you run create ap.sql, you're going to set your AP database, APDB, back to where it was when it started. So all of your dates are created new. So what's happened is, since we've been here, when we created the database the first time, it set the dates. And so we did that back in June, I guess. So you'll have invoices. If you look at that, your invoices are there. You know, they're talking about June 10th and stuff like that is when most of your invoices are. But now if you came back there and said, okay, show me all the invoices that are due in 10 days from today, you won't find any. Why? Because they've all gone off the clock. So run your create AP again, and that will refresh all of your database, and it'll bring them all currently to today. So some of them are in the past, some of them are in the future. These are pretty handy. These I use more than about anything else. Date add. Find a day that is 90 days from today. "90 days from today" is going to be, I say add. Okay, the first argument, how to interpret this thing. These are, so this is it's called date part. What is this thing? Is it day, you know, what is this? Is this days? Is this years, weeks, months? And so this is days. If I don't have this, it won't know how to interpret 90, because it's going to try to add 90 to a date, and wait a minute, what 90 what? So you have to tell it what. So this is the D will give you 90 days. If I say months in there, it's going to interpret that. It's going to give me the date that is 90 months from today. Make sense? So that first one is a D, and it is a literal. It's kind of a flag. It's not a. You do not put it in quotes. I don't think it'll take it in quotes. Yep, it's giving me a red line there. So it's just D sitting there. And so this is going to give me the date that's 90 days from today. And I find that to be August 23rd. Questions? Now this next one is really neat. I mean, well, really confusing. Date diff. This is date add, date difference. Add, subtract. Subtracts dates. How many days are between them? Again, you have to tell it how to interpret what you want. I want the number of days. Now, look at this carefully, because I don't know about you, but I always get this one backwards. So I just do it. I remember it the best I can, and I write it the best way, and I think, let's see, now how would that go? And then it's the other way, trust me. Let's take a look at it. Today is 25th of July, 2019. How many days is it until the 27th of 2019? Did I say 2015? 29. How many days is it until July 27th? Well, it's 2 days, right? Okay, so we know that. We got that settled. And so when I execute this, I should see the that it's 2. Execute 2. Thank you. Okay. It is this one is the top. That's the second argument minus the first argument. So notice I put them in. I stacked them up like this just so we could see them a little bit better. But notice that the subtraction is going up. Okay, it is the second argument minus the first argument, so it's a little bit different from what you'd expect. As long as you remember that, it's okay. But you have to think about it. It's the second argument minus the first argument. So if you were just writing 2 minus 3, excuse me, 3 minus 2, 3 minus 2, you'd expect to get 1. But if you said date diff, D, the date 3, comma 2, it's going to subtract 3 from 2, and you're going to get a negative 1. So usually when I think of it, if I'm just thinking of it, I usually think of the date I want to subtract from on the top, and then this one on the bottom, because if I write them that way. But this one, when I execute this, I'm going to get a negative 2. Notice that's a negative. I don't know whether you can see it or not, but it is. I'll get a negative 2 because it's taking the second argument, 25, and it's subtracting the first argument, which is 27. Make sense? Hope so. Let's see, what is this? This is date diff. I don't know why I put this one in there. 1227. Oh, this one is 155 days. But what I'm saying is, what if I changed it in, okay, down here I did. If I changed it as months, I want to know how many months it is. So now I'm using M on there. I believe you can use W. Check the book. So it's 5 months difference. I was getting something weird when I put W in there. I think I think you can write DAY in there. So I think this is going to tell me how many weeks. So it's 22 weeks, and that's correct. What did not work for me that I was expecting to work, it did not accept it correctly when I put W in there. See, it's still giving me 155, and it's 155 days. So I don't know, I was expecting D and W and M. When I put W in there, it doesn't work. But if I spell it out, W-E-E-K, it does work. And this one will also let you spell it out, and you can spell it D-A-Y, and that will also work. And you can spell out month also. So sometimes I recommend that people just go ahead and spell it out. I don't know. If it gives you if it gives you trouble, go ahead and spell out day, week, month, because I want it in days or weeks or months or years. I guess you get it in centuries. I don't know. Here's a task. Let's see. Let's find all. Use this guy, and let's find all the invoice numbers that are less than 10 days old. And because I have just updated my AP database, I'm going to find, I think, 3 of them if you'll run it. So just before you start messing with these date differences and stuff, update your date. It only takes it about 3 or 4 seconds to update, and just go ahead and execute that create AP. It's in module 2, page 5 if you need to get it. And so if I execute this, I find that there are 3 of them. The invoice date of 7/16, 7/17, 7/18 are less than 10 days old on 7/25. Now, if I had any that were in the future, future invoice dates, then they would also appear as less than 10 because they would have negative numbers on them, right? Remember, we date diff, we take the second one, which is today, and subtract the invoice date. Well, if the invoice date is in the future, we're going to get a negative number, and a negative number will be less than 10. If you switch them around, I could switch these guys, and then I could say greater than or equal to 10, and I would accomplish exactly the same thing. So the best thing to do, if it's a fairly large, number, and you're getting a lot of records, push that number down, that difference down to where you just get 1 or 2, and then check it and make sure that you're getting something that's right. For the most part, I think I've always put, look at the invoice date. So check your dates. Don't just say, oh, I got something, and so it must be right. Yeah. Questions?
Yes, question.
Yeah.
When I go back in my own server management studio and type what you had, just the select date diff D and cast 2 values as date, I get an error message that says type date is not defined system type.
Where which one is it now? This one?
Just that one, yeah. And I had that problem once with another assignment where we were supposed to create a table, and I tried to use date, but I had to use date time instead. So
okay.
I'm not sure why.
What version do you have?
Well, that is a good question. What? Let me see. Go to help. What version should I have?
Well, we're using 2017. Now you might have one that so date. I think date's been around since 2012, I think.
I mean, I've got version 15.0.
Oh, okay. You got 2015. Yeah, that it might. No, not 2015.
Well, it must be looking at it's server. When I look at server management studio, oh, I'm sorry, version 18.1. I'm looking at the versions of the components, which are much more detailed. So I've got version 18.1.
Yeah, but you don't care so much about the management studio as you do about the database itself, the actual database engine. I'll tell you what we'll do. I think we can. If you want to hang on after
sure.
Recording,
thank you.
I think we can fix it.
Thank you.
Or maybe we can't. Maybe you'll just have to use date time. Anytime you might use a small try small date and see if that works. Anyway, I'll come back there. Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, we are at 6:50, and that's the time I generally wrap up. Let me look over here and see what we're going to do next. So next thing that we got coming down the pike is going to be test 2. I don't think it's a real difficult test. And so the people who did well on test 1 usually do quite well on test 2. Got selected topics and database design, maintaining indexes, and then we're going creating views. Sometimes I will do creating views right here. So what I might do is I might renumber this one and bring it up. So I might make this 13, 14, and then this one 12, and reorder them. Because I usually like to do views first. And so I believe I'm probably going to do that. So I think the next one I'm going to do, excuse me, is we're going to create views. And they're actually pretty easy, but they're pretty important. So basically I can, let me just lay the groundwork for it. If you are familiar with Access, I'm so sorry. No, I'm not. There's nothing wrong. I badmouth Access all the time. There's nothing wrong with Access. It's just a little single user database. And when you create a query in Access, remember you drive your little mouse around and click here and clicky there. And then when you get the thing, when you get it like you want it, you save it, right? And so you've saved your SQL query. Now, that is actually, it's out there in SQL. So Access reads SQL. And if you went to the SQL view, you would see your query in SQL. Yeah. But what you have done there, you have really created a view because this thing is kept in the database. It exists as an object in the database. Whereas in our world, when we write an SQL query, the SQL query just exists for a moment. But what I can do is, like they do in Access, I can save that SQL query as a table, if you like, as a dynamic table, and it becomes an object, and it really is another table. And that's what we do in database views, and it's very nice. We're going to see that I use them a lot, and there's lots of things that I can fix using views, little problems as the one that Tracy was mentioning about changing the type of a field in the change it. I want to change it from a decimal to a float, or a float to a decimal, or whatever. Oh, I'm going to throw a fit. I would rather eat a bug than change a data type, because that's really going to mess up my database. What I would do is I would create something that looked like what I wanted. And then I would hide the stuff I didn't want to see, and then I would put the stuff in it that I did. And to the person who was using it, it would look like you had changed the data type, but you really didn't. And that's what we're going to see here. So when we have a view, it's going to look something like this. Create a view, and then as, and an SQL statement. Just about any SQL statement. Yeah, there's more to it than this. By the way, I've got this word create. Anytime we use that word create, what do we have to have? Go. Go before it, go after it. Go before the statement. So I said go, create view, blah, 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 end it, go. Just like creating tables. You don't have to say go in between every line of your SQL, but when you create, you have to say go, create, and then when you finish, you say go again. So this looks like a table. That really is a table, but the output is calculated each time you select from it. And that's where we're going to go next. Okay? Okay. So I'll say sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof, and we will leave that for next time. I'm going to make test 2 available. Test 2 will not be due before the next class meeting. So if you're having difficulties, and if you want to scream at me about it or something, next class meeting, I'll troubleshoot any issues with it. I want you to have enough time to do it. I really do. It's my job to get you through this class. So we'll do everything we can for that. But I think it's probably going to be due. My feeling is Wednesday. Okay. Then if you're happy with your grade, you don't have to fool with the final. Questions? Okay, let's see. I'm going to turn off the recorder now. And Tracy, we'll see if we can fix your issues. I don't know whether I can fix them or not. Questions, anybody? Okay, I see people starting to disappear. I'm ending the recording.